So this morning, I'm going to be talking about the book of Joshua. The first chapter is very popular. And wow, with God's guidance, God's promises to the people of Israel, his promises to them and how they were going to enter into the promised land, God's promises never change. They are as relevant to us as they were in the Old Testament. And here's an example of how God chose a new leader. Be strong. I want to encourage each and every one of you this morning. Be strong and follow the leader. So it's important, first of all, to be encouraged, to put heart into. And we notice that God encourages his leader. Sometimes that person who's stepping into the new shoes, they need to remember that God is there to support them and give encouragement. So that's what Joshua 1:9 is about. And it's talking about this new generation that's going to take over the leadership. So there's an encouragement from God's commission. In the Old Testament and in the New Testament, we see God's command to spread the word to all nations. And they were called to go into the promised land. In the New Testament, God has called us to go into all the world. But it's a new generation that's taking over, that's getting ready to lead. And they're going to face some new challenges. People were reliant on Moses for over 40 years. And now there's this new person. And so that transition of leadership was going to be a challenge. And it's going to be a challenge of us as we transition to Nehemiah being the leader of our church. But God is going to help us enter the promised land, have victory. It's not an easy life. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be criticism. Perhaps even persecution. Perhaps even attacked because of God's divine commission. Some people, they're not going to want to follow the new leader. But be strong. Be courageous. We need to focus flexibly on the future. And today I often hear people and pastors who go into leadership over the years, maybe it's 50, 60, 70 years of leadership. But when that person dies, the church stops. It goes out of business, as it were. And our goal is to make sure that the new generation is ready and in a position of leadership to take over in case the leaders die. An example of this is my parents and my family. I looked at their leadership. You know, my parents have passed, and they passed it on to me, and I've grown, and now my children are looking to me. And even my grandkids and my great-grandchildren, as I become older and older, you know, it's passing on. You know, you have to just pass the baton, as it were. You have to take that time to teach how to be a leader and that transition. And so that's our goal at this church, transition to new leadership. Sometimes a pastor just leaves and people don't know what to do next. And they start looking to try to find another pastor to bring someone in, and they start searching. And there's like a vacancy. Sometimes 20, 25 years, there's no lead pastor. So this means members, lay people, take turns preaching and teaching. We don't want that to happen at our church. So our goal is that we would find someone to teach, to train them, so they'd be ready to take on that mantle. And I'm not just going to leave Nehemiah on his own and leave you as sheep without a shepherd, without a pastor. That's not my intention. I'm not going to let that happen, okay? I'm going to be here to offer support. You know, I can't leave until I'm going to pass on. But the point is that Nehemiah can get that practice in. It takes a long time. It can take over 10 years to get used to learning, and it takes a lot of patience and a lot of training, a lot of teaching, and a lot of learning. And Nehemiah's going to make mistakes, but we want you to be patient with him so that the time comes, so that he's ready. God has sent another person. I want you to be joyful at this change. I don't want you to be saddened by it, this transition. And like this is talking about, consider the adaptive leadership and the transfer practices of Moses, who was an encourager of next generation leaders. And we want the same thing to happen here at our church. Search the following references to Joshua. To gain some understanding into his character. We want to understand Joshua's life and the mentorship that he experienced with Moses. In Exodus chapter 24, verse 13, we see that Joshua was willing to serve Moses. Moses asked and Joshua followed. Remember, Moses went up on the mountain and stayed there for 40 days and nights. And where was Joshua? He was halfway up the mountain waiting for Moses. The Jewish people were down beneath, but Joshua was halfway up the mountain. And he's the one that recognized, it sounds like there's war going on. And Moses said, no, the people are having a party. They're sinning. They've fallen away to worshiping idols and offering sacrifices to a golden calf. And God came down and wrought destruction, and Joshua was willing to work with Moses. He was willing to obey Moses' commands. We see in Exodus chapter 32, verse 17, that Joshua had great discernment. He had this desire, he had these goals. We see in Exodus 33, chapter 11, that Joshua held a special place in Moses' eyes. Moses had high regard for Joshua. He relied on Joshua, and the two of them were a team. They relied on each other. We notice point D here in Numbers chapter 14, verse 30 and 38. Only Joshua and Caleb were spared when the spies went into the promised land. They were getting ready. They were supposed to take over the promised land, and they were getting ready. And so the 12 spies went in, and only 2 spies said, we're ready to go to war. We're ready to take over this promised land. But the Jewish people, there were 10 that said, we can't take it over. We're going to fail. Our enemies, oh my goodness, that country is huge, and our enemies, they're so powerful. We were like grasshoppers in their eyes. They're going to defeat us. But Joshua and another man named Caleb, the two of them, 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, both of them stood together. And they said, no, our enemies are like grasshoppers. We will crush them. It'll be no big deal. We'll defeat our enemies. But all the Israelite people, they rebelled against God. And the 10 spies influenced the people. But Joshua and Caleb, they were like, no, we're going to stand against. We're going to defeat them. You see, this attitude they had was one of courage. So we see that Moses commissioned Joshua to lead the people. example. We'll take a look at Numbers chapter 27, verse 18. So when Yahweh said to Moses, take Joshua the son of Nun, God gave this command. When the time was right, God called him. God said, take Joshua the son of Nun, the man who is the Spirit, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him, and have him stand. Verse 19, and have him stand before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and commission him in their sight. And you shall put some of your authority on him. Some of your authority, not all of your authority. We're just going to pass it all on at once, but it's some of your authority, just a portion of it. So that person's going to take up some of Moses' responsibility in order that all the congregation of the sons of Israel may obey him. This is in Numbers chapter 27, verse 18. Remember, there were over 2 million people. There were hordes and masses of people. And Joshua is taking up some of the responsibility. People are going to obey Joshua just like they obeyed Moses, obeying the commands.
So now we're going to speak about a generational transference. And this is from Joshua, verses 1 through 2. So we see here the depiction of Moses and then the depiction of Joshua on the right-hand side. And we see how Moses would be transferring the power that he had to Joshua, who would take it up, who would take up this responsibility over all of these people. So Moses died. I mean, he was very, very old. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This is 120 years old, not 100. And for 40 years, Moses had been there. He had taken up all of that work with those peoples. And at the very, very last, and remember that he buried his two sons. He had gone up on the mountain. Remember that he had seen God in the burning bush, and he had gone to the king, the Pharaoh, to get his people out of Egypt as slaves. Remember, he had grown up in Egypt himself for about 40 years and then led them out for another 40 years through the wilderness. So, all in all, he lived to be 120, and then he died. And it says here that he died, Moses, the servant of the Lord. And then it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, who was the son of Nun, and Moses' assistant. Notice this word, his assistant. An interesting word, another word that they have in translation is that we have a word, mentee, which is different vocabulary. For instance, my son Nehemiah, he's been the assistant pastor to me. But it says here that Moses, God's servant, had died. And he said, and God said to him, therefore arise, meaning, come, get up, be ready. Be ready to lead my people over this Jordan. You and all of this people to the land which I am giving to them. The children of Israel. He was giving that land, and he was saying, be ready, come on. Take up this responsibility and go. Now it's important here that we take notice of this, that Joshua himself, he was strong. He had real courage, and he had like a real fortitude, and he trusted in God and in all of God's promises. We see this in this chapter of Joshua, that he was faithful to God. And another very significant thing was that he obeyed God, not men. He knew the value of trusting in God, in believing in God's law. And these are in verses 7 and 8. And then it says that he stood firm in the face of adversity, in the face of his enemies. Because all through the land, there were many people who came against them that they would have to fight against. And Joshua stood strong. He stood firm. He had courage. He trusted God. And we see this throughout this chapter in these verses 1 through 9. Now, God's promises, they're mentioned in this chapter again, Joshua 1, verses 3 to 5. And we see that God's promises throughout all of time. So we see all these little feet, these little footsteps that are going through. But in Joshua chapter 1, verse 3, it says, every place that the sole of your foot, the sole, it doesn't mean only, but it means the bottom of your foot. See these little footprints with the toes and the imprints of the toes and everything making footprints. So he's saying every place that you walk upon, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, all of this land is yours. It would be for them. As far as they could walk, wherever their feet would touch, it became their land. Think of it. Think of that promise that God had made to them. You know, Joshua had gone and he had vanquished many people, many armies. And God said, every place that you step, that's yours, period. No discussion. Just going. Wherever. It became the land of the Israelite children. Everything that they would take would become theirs. Everything that they would capture would become theirs because God had given it to them through his promise of the ages. So again, I reiterate, it says, every place upon which the sole of your foot will touch be yours. I give it to you, children of Israel. That was a powerful promise. Those were powerful words. Now we see that the Lord told Joshua, he told him what the great boundaries of this land would be. So we see on this map here that it says, the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, all of the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea, we see it in blue up here, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. All of this land, when you consider it, they were all to take this up. God is saying, it's yours. It wasn't the Israelites' decision to do that. It was God's decision. It was his promise that he had given to their forefathers. Because remember, they had traveled quite far. And they had gone through many, many lands. And God promised. Now, we see this promise as well. We see that the Lord told Joshua that he would be with him. It said, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. He was saying, no man will be able to prevent you from taking this land which I have given to you, which I have promised to you. Nobody is going to stand in your way. He says, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And I will not leave you nor forsake you. This was God's promise. You know, no matter what enemies they had, no matter what people tried to prevent them, no matter what people tried to block them from going there, God was with them. Because we remember in Matthew, last verse 20, he says, I am with you always until the end of time. I mean, think of that. Even Jesus said that. I am with you always. Just like God was telling Joshua, I am always with you. Wherever you travel, I am with you. I am there. Through ever what land, no matter how large, no matter how great, whatever you take, I promise I will give it to you. So we see that God promised to give them this land. And we see also God's written word in this. And we see this in Joshua chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. All of this had been written down way before it ever happened. So we see in Joshua 1:6 that God says, be strong, be of good courage. For to these people, now remember, he's talking about the 12 different tribes that had been established. All of these people have been saying, you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. So see, God had put this down well before the present Israelite people were there. All of their forefathers. And who were these people? Now we see it goes as far back as Abraham's covenant. Now that was the first one that God told Abraham what he would give him. He told him that he would give him a land. And he made that promise so many years ago. Now we see this as far back as in Genesis. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. If you read these verses, you will see he promised a seed. He told Abraham, you will become a great nation. A great nation. The Israelites would become a great nation that would rule. So this was given to Abraham. Now it had not yet passed down through all of the Israelite people, but it would go down through his son, Isaac, and the 12 tribes. Now the 12 tribes, they would take possession of this land, this promised land that God was promising as far back as to Abraham. And this promise never changed. Never changed. It always stayed faithful. We see the second point in this. It's a personal blessing. God said, I will bless you. He told this to Abraham. I will bless you, each and every one of your descendants. They will cover the world, and I will bless you. Through Abraham, all of this happened. And we see the third point here, that it was a universal blessing. For all of the people on the earth, they will be blessed through you. And then through Jesus Christ, who himself was one of the Jewish people. He gave all of these blessings to all of the people on the world. So all of these people were able to be part of Abraham's covenant, Abraham's blessing. And this promise never changed. It went through the generations, and you can see it through history, through this long period of time. From when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt until they came out of Egypt from bondage, and then they traveled around in the desert for 40 years until they got to the land where they would tread upon. From this promise of Abraham, it came all the way down to them. From when God came out of and they traveled as well into a land. And God gave him that land as well. God kept his promises. He kept his promise to Abraham. It never wavered. He never lied. And now we still receive the blessings that were given all of that time ago. So we see how the leadership passed through time until it got to Joshua, until the promise was given to Joshua that wherever they trod, this would become their land. And then we see it here in this fourth point. God said, I will give this land. God's promise continues, and that is an awesome, awesome thought from the Abrahamic covenant. And it continued through all of that time. God told Joshua in Joshua chapter 1 verse 7, only be strong and very courageous. God told Joshua to avoid turning to the right or to the left. Moses had had a hard life, and it was time for Moses to die. Moses went up to the mountain and he died. And God buried and hid his body up there on the mountain. God buried Moses. The Israelites, they tried to look for Moses' body. For 30 days, in fact. They were looking and searching, but God buried Moses. And they were like, where is his body? We want to find his bones. We want to excavate the body. Where's Moses' body? It's never been found. The body of Moses has never been found. The Jewish people wanted to hold on to Moses because they loved him. They didn't want to let go of him and pass that on to that new generation. I know how it is. But it was best that Moses died. And God didn't want the Jews to... He was 120 years old. But when he died, his body was weak, but his mind was strong. And he was mentally very sharp at 120 years old. But God took him, and God prevented that. Because it was time to pass the baton on to the next generation. The mantle needed to be taken up by Joshua. Joshua was this new leader, and it was going to be very hard for the Jewish people because they'd been so reliant on Moses. And now they were going to have to focus in on this new leader. It was going to be very difficult, this transition, this new transitioning into new leadership. We notice that the verse says, only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it, neither to the right hand nor from the left. That you would follow on track with everything God told Moses, and then you would prosper wherever you go. This verse is essential for us. We're not to deviate from what God has commanded us to do. We're to keep on track with what he's called us to do. Go for it. We're not to look back, we want Moses, we want an old leader. No, we're to continue on to do life. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the definition of courage from dictionary.com. I found it. It says the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty, danger, pain, etc. without fear, bravery. So that's the definition of courage. And the Merriam-Webster dictionary, Merriam-Webster says courage is mental or moral strength to venture, to persevere, to withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. So here are two definitions of the word courage. We need courage at this time. We need that ability to withstand. We need to stand strong now as a church. I want to make another point here. The Lord told Joshua to meditate on the Word of God day and night. As we get ready to have this new generation, to focus on this new generation, we need to focus on the Word of God. And then the verse goes on to say in Joshua chapter 1, verse 8, Moses
There are 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These are the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. God was telling Joshua, study. Remember, the rest of God's word, Psalms hadn't been written yet. We just had the 5 books of the law. And God was saying to Joshua, study this. In Genesis chapter 1, it said, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. God created Adam and Eve out of the dust of the earth. God formed them, and then sin came in the world. The flood came. And we see that God brought Abraham, and God was telling Joshua, study these books of the Bible. Study how your ancestors were called out of slavery, how they sacrificed the Passover lamb, how they celebrated with unleavened bread. Study. And make sure to meditate on this day and night, that you may obey and do all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and you will have good success. Your life will be successful. As leaders, please make sure that you focus in on the Word of God in each and every person. If there's one challenge I could leave you with today, I exhort you and I encourage this new generation to focus in on the Word of God. Don't veer from it to the right, don't veer from it to the left, because you're going to make mistakes. Focus in on the Word of God. Then your life will have good success. So the last verse 9, God gives a command. In Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, there's a command. Let's take a look at it. The Lord told Joshua that he would be with Joshua. Think about this. God said, have I not commanded you? God emphasizes it over and over again. Be strong and of good courage. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. Don't be afraid. New generation, I'm speaking specifically to you. As this mantle passes, don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. Joshua and Moses, the two of them, they had very different lives. Moses was traveling in the desert, but Joshua was taking over the promised land. He was settling down into a life of relaxation and inheriting that good land that God had promised to give. They had different journeys, but they both obeyed God's word. God says, be of good courage. Do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed. Don't lose heart. Don't be dismayed. Be strong. Be of good courage. For the Lord, Yahweh your God, is with you always. Wherever you go, God is always with you. No matter where you go, no matter who the mantle passes on to, God gives us this same promise. Share the gospel. You're here today. The gospel is standing strong. It's impacting lives, and for over 2,000 years it has been. People still come together. God's word stands strong through the ages. God has made a promise to us that all people will be saved who call on the name of Jesus. So, God's command in verse 9, God's commands, and God commands us, we need to obey him, are God's enablement. In the New Testament, God has given us his commands, and we need to obey him. We see in Luke chapter 1, verse 7, it says, for with God nothing shall be impossible. For no word, with God, all things are possible. Maybe you say, I can't. but with God it is possible. For no word from God shall be void of power. The Holy Spirit helps us. The Holy Spirit convicts us and guides us. Faithful servant, effective leader. Numbers chapter 27, and also Deuteronomy.
We see that God is saying that with your new leaders, with your appointed leaders, we are to encourage them. We are to support them as they move on into this new land. He said, but command Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him. For he shall go over before this people, and he shall cause them to inherit this land, which you will see. We see that God's command was to encourage, to support, to help. That's what we have to do with new leaders. We have to be there for them, to help them. Just as God promised, just as God asked, we are to remain in unity, not to harm the church, not to cause dissension in the church. You know, we have had many different leaders that we have supported, Dennis Smith, all of the different people. We have never left the church alone, on their own. We'd never do that. But, you know, even before the time comes that I would die and I would go off to heaven, we would have to have new leaders to come through and to do the work of the church.
So I have a couple of applications for us. I have a couple of applications for us in this time of transition. You know, in this time of transition, we gotta remember God's promises to us. God's promises never change. And God has made promises to us that encourages us. And God made a promise to Abraham, and God continues to, over all these years, God has made us a promise, and his promises still stand strong. So let's be encouraged today from God's word. And let's obey God's word. Even when generational transference happens, love the Lord your God, love your neighbor, love your enemy. Second Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. It says, entrust the truth to faithful men who will teach others. Pass it on. We see how Paul and Peter and John, and they passed it on all the way till today. And then our brother Paul Luce passed it on to me, and now I'm getting ready to pass the baton on to Nehemiah. We need to pass it on to those who will be faithful. This is God's command. He never changes. Amen? Let's stand together for prayer.